Hello, good day to one and all. This is Miss A. Krishna Sundar, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KAHM Unity Women's College, Manjeri. Today we would be dealing with one of the pieces in the textbook Signatures Expressing the Self, which is prescribed for BA-BSc General English by Calicut University. So the title here is Final Speech in the Movie The Great Dictator, and this is part 1, which would give you an introduction to the author here, and the author here is Charlie Chaplin. Now Charlie Chaplin needs no introduction, but still we'll just have a quick look at his life. He was born in the year 1889 and his full name is Charles Spencer Chaplin. He is a great English comic actor, a filmmaker, and even a composer. He's even considered as one of the most important icons in the history of film industry. And his career spans for around 75 years, and he was very famous with what we call as slapstick comedy. So now the question comes, what is a slapstick comedy? A slapstick comedy is in fact a low kind of comedy, and the comedy is actually initiated through a physical action. Now, maybe if you look at the movies around us right now, we never use this kind of a slapstick comedy. Usually, comedy arises from conversation or through dialogues. That is how it goes in the recent days. But it was very different because initially in movie industry, most of the movies came without sound. So this was the only technique that was used during the period. So it was only through physical action they could evoke laughter. Now, if you look at the pictures, you can see two huge men are falling on top of another man, and you can see an inverted poster of Charlie Chaplin himself. Now, look at the picture again, the third one. You can see the one person is actually poking into the eyes of the other person. And the fourth picture, the last picture, you can see somebody is going to cut the hair with the scissors and see the size of the scissors. So these were the techniques which were used to evoke laughter during this period. Now, today we consider this as a low kind of comedy, but remember, this was considered as the only one technique employed to evoke laughter during the earlier times. So, getting back to Charlie Chaplin again, the greatest awards and recognitions that he has received. He received a special Golden Lion at Venice Film Festival. He has also achieved a Lifetime Achievement Award from Lincoln Center. He has got 3 Academy Awards. Now, Academy Awards is basically what you call as Oscars. So he has won 3 such Oscar awards and multiple nominations too. He is also considered as a fellow of BAFTA. Now, BAFTA is British Association for Film Television Arts. Now, these are only just a few of the recognitions that he received. He has got an enormous collection of awards and recognitions, which I am not going to mention as of now. So, getting into his life again. His father's name was Charles Chaplin Sr. and his mother Hannah Chaplin. Now you can see the pictures, the last picture. And he was born in south of London, and even his parents were performers. They were entertainers in one way, not exactly in the way in which Chaplin performed. Now, if you look at the initial days of Chaplin, you can see that he was stuck with poverty and hardships. His father was an alcoholic and his mother was sent to an asylum because of mental depression. So you can imagine the condition of this child. Now, this is his home in London. Now, getting back to his personal side, legally he had 4 wives. Now, the first one is Mildred Harris. You can see the picture. Then comes Lita Gray. Then comes Paulette Goddard. And finally, Una. Now, Charlie Chaplin was always having a very bad reputation in connection with women because it was believed that Chaplin always loved marrying very young girls. And if you look at his wives, you feel there is some kind of truth in it because his fourth wife, Una, was just 18 when Chaplin married her, and Chaplin was around 53 then. Out of all these relationships, we can see it was the last relationship which survived because he had a very close relationship with Una. The marriage really worked between them despite the age difference. Another interesting thing was that after the death of Chaplin in the year 1977, his body went missing from the grave. So that was a kind of kidnapping, but you can't call it kidnapping because it was a dead body which was actually taken up by the robbers. And his surviving widow, the wife Una, started getting a number of calls asking for a ransom amount. So she made a complaint to the police officers, and finally the robbers were caught and the dead body was back to the grave. So this was something which became very controversial and something like a very debatable kind of thing which happened, because this kind of a dead body being missing from the grave was the first of its kind to happen in history. Okay, so getting back to his story again. Now, he has also lived for a number of years in Switzerland, and you can see it's a very beautiful home that he has got in Switzerland. Now, look at the panoramic beauty, the scenic beauty, the flowers, etc. So, this was a place where he spent a number of months with his fourth wife, Una. So, moving on to some of the great movies that Chaplin has created. The first one is The Tramp, the second one, The Gold Rush, City Lights, Modern Times, and of all these movies, the greatest one is The Great Dictator. Most of these movies are available in YouTube, and some of them can be downloaded in a torrent. If you are very keen, you can definitely watch these movies. So, what is this movie about? Because this is a movie that we are concentrating as of now, because the last part of the movie comes in the form of a speech, and it is that speech which we are going to learn. Now, this is a 1940 American movie, and it is a satire. As you know, a satire is actually how a piece of work actually criticizes the society in a mocking way. So it is in fact a comedy drama. It is even considered as a political satire because it is ridiculing the current politics which remained in Europe during the period. And this is also a movie which is condemning Hitler and Mussolini. Not just Hitler and Mussolini, all the dictators of the world. So it comes in the form of a final speech, and it is that final speech which we will be learning in this text. So, what exactly is the story of the great dictator? Now, the story goes like this. There is a Jewish barber who participates in the First World War, and unfortunately, as the First World War comes to an end, his airplane crashes on a tree and he is heavily wounded and injured. So, this barber is taken to the hospital. He loses his memory completely and he is stuck in the hospital for another 20 long years. Now, within this 20 long years, a lot of things happen within his country. New political parties come up, new political leaders come up. So there is a tremendous kind of social change which happened during this period, during this 20 years. Now, within this 20 years, a man called Hinkel becomes the dictator of the country. Now, this Hinkel and this barber, they look almost the same. Now, without knowing that the country is under the dictatorship of a man called Hinkel, the barber is released from the hospital. Now, when barber is released from the hospital, that is exactly the time when Hinkel goes for summer holidays. Now, what happens here is that since these two people are looking alike, their identity is actually mistaken. So, believing that the barber is a dictator, he is taken by the political group. On the other hand, believing that Hinkel is a Jewish barber, he is imprisoned. Now, if you know about the storylines with Germany and the Second World War, you can see how Hitler had actually persecuted, tortured, and killed the Jews. He was totally against Jews, and he killed millions of people during that period. So, here again, since Hinkel was totally against Jews, believing that Hinkel is the barber, he is imprisoned, whereas the real barber is believed to be the dictator Hinkel, and the real barber is taken for a speech, for delivering a speech. Now, this barber, he doesn't know to deliver a speech, and he starts talking about the things in his mind. So, he gives a selfless speech in the way how a selfless leader should be, and most of the people are really shocked because this is not the way the real Hinkel speaks. So this is the crux of the story. So coming back to these points, he resembles the dictator. He is mistaken and asked to take up the position, and he finally gives an impassioned speech. So how a leader should be. A leader should always be selfless. So that is a message that is conveyed through this speech. Before we get into the text, we need to know a little bit about Hitler, because without knowing about him, it is very difficult to understand this piece. Now, Hitler, as you all know, is always connected with Germany, but remember, he was born in Austria. He started as a chancellor of Germany, and finally he reaches the dictatorship. And his dictatorship started in the year 1933 and it continued till 1945. That is the end of the Second World War, and that was a time when he committed suicide. Now, Eva Braun is his legal wife, whom he got married to on the day of his death. He died in the year 1945. A brief look at Hitler's life. You can see his father on the right hand side, you can see the mother, and it was often said in his biography that he had often been beat and tortured by his father. Maybe he inherited this kind of a reluctance to life from his father. He wanted to become a painter, in fact, but we all know how he ended up finally. Now, this happens even with us sometimes because we dream of something else and finally we end up somewhere else. So this is something which is very common. So you can see a very cute little Hitler here. Now maybe we might not have thought that, oh, this is the person who is going to rule Germany, not just Germany, going to be the dictator for the entire world for a couple of years. So getting back to his political party, this is Nazism, and the symbol that is used, maybe you're familiar with the symbol, and the symbol is known as swastika, which is indicating good luck. So let us take a look at the main ideals of Nazism. They promoted German pride and anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism is actually hostility and discrimination against Jews. Now, Jews actually came from Israel, and because of that, Hitler believed that these people will make the Aryan blood impure. So, he wanted to keep or maintain the purity of Europeans, and that was one reason he has stated for having killed a number of Jews. Now, during this period, all other political parties were completely banned. They started having concentration camps, and all the Jews were actually brought up into these camps and they were persecuted, tortured, and killed. Maybe you might have heard about the term Holocaust. So these are a few pictures from Holocaust. Now they are very horrendous kind of picture. So you can see a lady escaping from the concentration camp. Again, you can see a pile of dead bodies. You can see in another picture where these Jews are made to scrub and clean the floor. Now, when these people were taken to concentration camps, they were killed in different ways. Some of them were actually killed in a very horrifying way, like peeling their skin off. Some others were actually placed in gas chambers where they suffocated and died. Some others, like, they were taken for medical experiments. So in short, it was a genocide of European Jews. And more than that, if you look at the pictures, you can see that the dead bodies are not having hair. So this hair was actually scraped off and made as stuff for filling cots, beds, etc. And moreover, their nails, their teeth, everything was pulled over, and lampshades and many other stuff were actually made. So you can see how horrifying it had been, in fact. So again, another picture where you can see the heap of dead bodies lying together one after the other. If you want to know more about Holocaust, you can definitely Google it out. You can see a lot number of pictures and topics and slides based on that. Now, if you want to look at Holocaust in a lighter way, I can suggest you one movie. The title of the movie is Life is Beautiful. Now, this is an Italian movie which is directed by Roberto Benigni. Now, it's a beautiful movie. I'm not sure whether it is available in any of the sites like Netflix or something. Definitely, you can download it by torrent ways. So, it's a beautiful movie. It's a story of a father and a son who are taken as prisoners to a concentration camp. So, how they tackle the situations there, it's definitely a tragic story, but still, it is a watchable kind of story. Now, there are so many other movies like Walk Your Eye, again, Inglorious Bastards, etc., which deals with the same topic, but those will not give you a very good feeling, because if you watch that, you will lose your peace of mind. So I would rather suggest you to watch this movie, Life is Beautiful, by Roberto Benigni. It was released in the year 1997, if my memory is right. Okay, so getting back to our point. So the great dictator here is actually a satire on Hitler. Now you can see they are dressed in almost the same way, and instead of swastika there is another symbol that Chaplin uses here. So they get swapped, and finally the barber becomes the dictator and the dictator is imprisoned. This is how the story goes. So now what is this chapter about? Now this chapter is in the form of a speech. It is a motivating and inspiring speech. It is about the dictatorship of Hitler. And the speech is about how a true leader should be, how selfless a leader should be. Moreover, the speech also deals with human compassion, brotherhood, and unity. Finally, how human beings should find the ground for sympathy and kindness. So, in a way, he is actually instigating people to get united and to fight against this dictatorship for a normal kind of living with compassion, brotherhood, and unity. So, this is just an introduction regarding the chapter so that you get to know something about Chaplin and at least something about Hitler, because only if you know about these things that you can get on with the chapter. So, for the time being, we will stop with this and we'll be continuing with part 2, which includes the analysis of the complete text. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for your patient listening. So if you have got any queries or suggestions or any other clarifications, you can definitely connect with me in my email ID. There is a blog of mine which you can check out. So thank you very much. Thank you.